I guess we'll get started talking about FIRE, which is financial independence, retire early. How many of you even heard of FIRE before this?
So made that title up, Betty. I'm impressed.
No, I mean it's a movement. This is actually, I believe, like the concept of FIRE, like the term, actually started like 1992. So I mean it's been around for a long time. It's really picked up movement. I'd say probably in the past 15 or 20 years. It is really, become really popular. Some, I'd say are a little obsessive. It's like the extreme savers. I'm sure you've seen some shows where, like, the extreme couponers and stuff, and how seriously they take it.
Yeah.
There are people that are in this FIRE movement that take it that serious. Now, there's all different types of FIRE. I'm not going to focus on all the different types of ones they have. They have like a barista FIRE. They have all these different like terms. And what that means is it's just different types of FIRE. Like some, they don't want to retire early. They may want to just work part-time. So that there's just different levels of type of retirement that they see. Some that, don't want to retire. They just like, you know what, I don't want to be working full-time in a stressful job. Maybe I want to be able to work part-time, but do something I like that's less stressful. Some are like the extreme savers, where they pinch every little single thing they do. And there's others like, you know what, I'm going to have a little bit of fun too. I'm going to save, but I'm not going to take to the extreme. I still want to do things during my retirement. And so there's just different types. But we're just going to do an overview of what FIRE is and kind of go from there. But before we get started, I always like to go and to the students and ask, why are you here? Why are you taking the workshop? Does FIRE seem somewhat interesting to you? What are you hoping to gain essentially from it? So, start here.
I'm Micah. I'm really interested in this program just because I never really saw what financial responsibility looked like growing up. So that's my
Stabbing the heart to death right there.
It's trying to learn, proper savings techniques and also look at money in kind of a different way than what we always have. Kind of spend happy.
And if you notice, what's this little bottom part that I put in there? A way of life. Because this is what, really, that's what I'm hoping that you get at the end of this workshop. It's FIRE, it's a way of life. It doesn't happen overnight. It takes, honestly, I think, years, to kind of develop these habits and get into that mindset. You're going to treat money and look at money differently, going forward, hopefully. So.
Well, I'm Kayleen, and one of the benefits of being a vice president to a company that we service really rich people's houses is that you see the way they're living, and a lot of them don't work a 9-to-5 job. And I began to ask further, like, well, how do people make this money? I always ask that. I'm like, I see their big house, I see what are you doing? I'm like, some will be a doctor and a physician. Okay, that makes sense. But then there's some that just invest their money in the right things and are just really responsible in that way.
Yeah.
So I always want to look at a different avenue of making money besides just the 9-to-5. I would like to have both going for me. So if ever something happens, I could retire early or be financially sound.
Or at least have the option of being able to retire if you wanted to.
I'm Debbie, and I'm a financial alcoholic. You're all supposed to say hi, Debbie. So I wish I had had this information when I was your guys' age, so I made much better financial decisions. Made so many financial mistakes in my life with credit cards and things like that. Just now getting to the point, over the last 2 years, we went through Dave Ramsey for the 3rd time, and it finally clicked. Proud to say my credit score went from a 677 to an 837 because of my efforts.
Which is crazy high.
Man,
really
I wish
good.
I would have discovered this a long time ago. So I'm glad you're teaching our students.
Okay, we'll go with Gina back here. Yes.
Okay, mainly I'm here for a point.
Oh, okay.
Let me
That's
be
okay.
honest, but
Hello.
I never learned anything about finance in school or at home. Grandparents didn't talk about, parents didn't talk about, bills just got automatically paid. At the age of 17 when I moved out, I thought you only had to pay rent one time and that was it. I was just totally clueless in my whole life. I kind of picked up up on things here and there, but I'm a late starter, so it did kind of intrigue me after talking to you about it.
Really think about that, like, you know, when we go to school, you know, think of all the classes that we take, you know, from elementary, you know, even the college. Hardly really any of those types of classes are finance, you know, about budgeting and saving. I mean, so we get all this education, except for the one thing that we probably need the most education with.
Yeah, they taught us how to write a check and put it in your register. They didn't tell you how to get the money in there or what to do with it, so.
When my kids were little, my oldest, who's 39 now, said he wanted to start a toy, and I said, "Well, I don't have any money," and he said, "You have a credit card?" I thought, okay, why have I taught this child? Just use the credit card.
Well, I have a couple more students that popped in, so just kind of introduce yourself briefly, just say, you know, why you're, you know, here. For some, hey, it's a point, and that's okay too. There's nothing wrong with that. So,
Hello, I'm Albie.
Hello.
I'm here to try to save more money.
okay, you know, I mean, saving's a good thing.
I like he said,
Yeah.
try to save more,
Yeah.
which means.
Yeah, it means he
He's
is saving.
loaded.
Yeah, whoever's came in, you know, that, you know, on the list that signed in, you know, there's 2 books still remaining. I know Christy came in for sure.
I'm Jordan.
Jordan.
Well, Albie, I think Jordan walked in before you, I'm not sure, but we'll get another one.
Oh, okay.
We'll get another one.
All right, so Jordan, introduce yourself a little bit and why
Oh,
you're here. Put you on the spot.
Yeah, it looks interesting and I want to point.
Okay, that works.
I'm just saying, I'm here for the
Now we're saving the best for last back there.
Oh no, it makes sense.
Okay.
That was like fire.
Yes, financial independence, retire early. Nice little catchy phrase there. So let's go ahead and dive in just a little bit what we're going to talk about. Hopefully the clicker works. Maybe, maybe not.
Turn it on.
Just turn on.
That probably does help.
This is.
It probably does help there. All
Look
right.
at my technology skills.
So one thing that we're going to look at here in a bit is, you know, what is FIRE? We're going to have to define that. You know, there are a lot of different terms out there. We're going to try to keep it as simple as possible. You know, start dreaming and planning for retirement because, I mean, you have to start thinking about what do you want to do during retirement. I mean, think how much time you're going to have once you retire. I mean, you really do, in a way, can lose, you know, the sense of who you are. Because think about it right now. Like if you're working or you're a student, that becomes your identity. And at some point, when you move on or you retire, you're going to have to redefine who you are and what you do. And so it's tough. It's very hard. There are some people who will retire and then they end up going back to the workforce. You know, just not for the money necessarily, just because it's just hard. Not everyone's built for early retirement. And so, but I do think there are habits, you know, that you can learn that even if you don't retire, you can still live a pretty nice life.
Yeah, I actually don't really want to retire, but I've known a lot of people recently that are becoming disabled, so they're kind of being forced to
Yep.
retire, and they weren't set up financially, and so I'm watching them struggle, and so, you know, God forbid I ever end up like that, I just want to be financially set.
Yeah.
Not distressed like that.
Yeah, and so all this, really what we're going to be learning today is really how to build good habits. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to retire, but at least you want to be in a position, what we call, you know, financial freedom. And so that's really what we're going to get at. And then of course, you know, we'll look at about cutting expenses, increase income. I can tell you, you know, if you are wanting to, you know, practice FIRE, you have to cut expenses. And so we're going to talk about, you know, what you need to be doing and what percentage you need to be doing. And then of course, you know, saving, you know, and investing. There is a difference between saving and there's a difference between investing, so we're going to kind of look at that a little bit, you know, and then obviously we're going to look at resources. That's what we're going to spend a lot of time on because I feel like we need to just get in there and practice it, and I'm going to show you a couple places that you can start going to. They have great articles, various types of calculators, because, I mean, you're not going to learn everything in this workshop, so you're going to have to go out there, but you need to know where to go, and so we'll look at that. Okay, so some stuff here, you know, so obviously this is a movement, you know, this is something that, you know, I mean, very popular. It's extreme saving, you know, FIRE. I mean, that's really what it comes down to, extreme saving and investing. You will typically save 50 to 75% of your income a month. You know, that's what, you know, FIRE is about. You know, extreme saving, So, you know, a lot of people are like, well, how much am I supposed to save? You know, how much money do you think most people save a month, percentage-wise? What's that?
10%.
5%.
Maybe, yeah, maybe 5. Honestly, a lot of them don't, you know, or it's a very small amount. And so, but imagine having to save 50% to 75% of your income. I mean, for some, that's just not possible right now. You know, but we're going to look at some other things that you can do to slowly get there a little bit later on. But yes, part of the FIRE, movement. Almost all websites, books will tell you you should be somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 to 75% of your take-home income should be going towards saving, investing type stuff. So we'll see. Well, we'll see if that's doable here in a little bit. And then obviously the traditional age, for most people who retire, we think of is around that age 65. We're going to look at something a little bit later. It's very popular among financial advisors, what they tell you should be saving. That plan that we're going to look at is typically what you should be doing, like the average person should be doing if they want to have a chance at retiring at 65. We're going to find out most people don't even do that and stuff, but it's a good starting point, and so that's what we're going to look at. And then obviously, FIRE, what does it really mean? Financial freedom. I mean, that's what it comes down to. Whether you decide to retire in your 30s, your 40s, or 50s, or whatever, you at least want to have the option. And so that is really why I like FIRE. Because eventually, imagine if you don't have to work. Do you think you would see work differently? You think, each day when you
Yes.
go to work, you just be in a different mindset.
Yep.
You're not being forced. You don't have to go. And so you're going by choice. And I can tell you, that will change your entire perspective, at that point. And so you're not working for a paycheck at that point. So things that we need to look at, about, what is retirement to you? Only you can define what retirement is. I mean, you can read all the books, like the books that we have here and various things, but at the end of the day, retirement has to, it has to be your plan, what you want to do. Now, we have a list up there of some things that you can be doing, like some people want to travel. I can tell you that, if you are part of the FIRE community and you're saving and investing, probably not going to be doing a ton of traveling, because it keeps expense low, low. But you can do some, if you budget for it. Obviously, take classes, learn new hobbies, volunteer, work part-time, and then obviously, start a side business. I know you recently have, been making the money on the side.
I like to say I'm retired now.
Yeah.
That's what I want to do.
Yeah, you're doing what you want to do. And so even if one day, let's say you work in a corporate job for many years later on, and then you decide, I'm still making good money on this side, you're probably not going to stop doing that. You're probably going to continue to do that on the side and still be able to generate, money in doing that.
That's
And-
what I want to do, retire from working for someone else.
Yeah.
In that sense.
And you're going to
Still
find
work.
a lot of the richer people, like you were talking about, many of them probably are business owners, a lot of them.
Or they invest in other businesses.
Or they invest in other, yeah.
Those businesses do well, and then they get, they don't even go to work, they just, taking money.
Yep.
So,
So, but yeah, so you have to define what it is for you. So now, I don't know what that is. It just kind of, like for Debbie, what would you consider retirement for you?
Travel. If
Yeah.
it were up to me, I'd be traveling all the time.
Yeah.
And
And
volunteering when I'm not traveling.
yeah. So you got to, but I will tell you, you got to fill the time. Because imagine how many hours you spend as a student right now, or classes that you're taking, studying that you're doing, or if you're working, how many hours you're putting in per week, doing that, and then imagine that all gone. And you got to fill the time.
It's traumatic. When I retired from teaching, it was like, who am I? Because for 33 years I said, I'm a teacher, I'm a principal, I'm a counselor, then who was I?
Yeah, because
That's why I
imagine
came out here.
when you meet new people. Like, let's say you go somewhere and you end up meeting some new people at a place. I mean, what typically do they ask you?
What do you do?
What do you do? And what do you say when you're 45 years old or whatever, and you're like, I'm retired? I mean, they may have a few questions for you, like, well, how'd you do that? I mean, so you've got to be thinking about this stuff, because it really is kind of an identity crisis, in the beginning. So we'll look at some other stuff. So how much is enough? How much money is enough? That's something that you have to actually sit down and actually calculate. Most people will tell you need 25 to 30 times whatever your expenses are. So,
Monthly?
what's that?
Is that monthly living expenses?
No, yearly.
Oh,
I mean, so like, I mean, you break it first, you say, okay, maybe it's $2,000 a month. We're just hypothetical here. And so I need $2,000 a month to live on. So for 1 year, that's $24,000. So for around 25 years, that's, I think, like $600,000. And then if it's 2,000, times 12 months, so it's 24,000. If you're going to do 30 years, I think it's 720,000. So yeah. So I mean, that's at 2,000 a month. It may be different. I mean, everyone's expenses are going to be a little different. 2,000 may not be nearly enough. Just depends on who you are and what you do. Yes.
When trying to figure this out, do we take into consideration things like inflation or anything like that?
Yeah, so I mean, you do want to look at that. Now, we're going to have some calculators we're going to be playing with later, and they have all types of different ones, that you can look at. I'll briefly talk about towards the end, but so one of the things that I'm planning for, when I'm able to be able to retire, I invest a lot. So I invest in stocks, and so they have dividends and so forth. And so I, have different categories of stocks. So dividends pay, and a dividend is basically an interest that they pay you for owning a share in a company. Most of these companies pay you 4 times a year a dividend, the vast majority of companies. And so let's say it's 5%, or 6%. But each year, most of these companies, they increase their dividend. So that's actually helping you adjust for inflation in the long run. As part of that, because your income is going to continuously, go up. Now that's a little bit more advanced. I'm not going to go into all that details, but that's something that I'm, considering as well. Whatever dividend stocks I buy, these stocks typically will move up each year. They will raise their dividend, and that's going to typically, and most of the time the dividend increase is around 2 to 3%, and inflation is typically in that 2 to 3% range. So if you are investing in dividend stocks, chances are, if you invest in a variety of different ones, that average, is going to account for inflation.
Do all stocks do dividends?
No. There are a lot that do. Now, when it comes to actually being able to retire, those are the type of stocks that you're generally going to want. You're going to want dividend stocks, because you're going to need to offset the income. But there are growth stocks out there, that necessarily, like Google, for example, they don't pay a dividend. But the vast majority of the money that you can make in those companies are through the capital appreciation. And so then when you sell it, you get capital gains. And so, but most people, when you're younger, you do that. But when you're older and you're looking for income, you're going to invest in stocks like AT&T, Verizon, things that pay, a pretty high percentage, yield, as that dividend. So, I mean, a little, not exactly tied to this, but yeah. So, I mean, I can help you, if you want a little bit more details on that, what type of, stocks and investments to do. But so some other stuff on here, financial advisors will tell you there's numbers all over the place, but they say around $1 to $2 million, for retirement. I've seen some say $3 million. I mean, honestly, it all just comes down to you specifically and what your lifestyle is. I mean, most people who practice FIRE, they don't need nearly as much because they generally keep their expenses really low to begin with. I mean, imagine that you're practicing this and you're saving 50 to 75% of your income. That means you're not a spender. And chances are you are building those habits and you're going to continue that probably for the rest of your life. I mean, you don't normally just retire and decide, oh yes, now I'm going to start blowing money all the time. I mean, you have built habits over the years. And so most people who practice FIRE, don't have an issue with, have to save nearly as much, just because their expenses are so low to begin with. Yes?
Now, this is just talking about just saving for retirement, right?
Well, it's saving
You want to save 25 to 30 times your living expenses, basically, or build that up in retirement?
Yeah, it all starts in the end. Part of FIRE is a couple things. One, you have to cut expenses. So that's part of it. You're learning, what to cut, what you can live with, what you can live without. It's kind of like the wants versus needs. So it's that mindset of determining what you value. And then obviously, you know, once you start, you know, addressing those issues, then you're going to be saving. But you can't just save in a regular savings account. You're not going to get there. You will not be able to save enough money to retire. It's just, most people are not going to make enough to be able to do that. You have to invest. I mean, so for some people, you know, they're really leery about investing in the stock market. I will tell you, you will not get there if you don't. Because most savings accounts, you're lucky. I mean, like, let's say you get a CD, certificate of deposit, they pay a little bit more, but you have to like lock it in for a certain time. Most of those, you're lucky if you get 1%. You can't, I mean, you're just not going to be able to retire getting a 1% return. You know, now the average stock market is generally between 7 and 8% on average a year of returns. So, I mean, you got 1% or less versus 7 or 8%. Some years are better than others, some years are worse than others, you know, but on average, 7 to 8%.
Andrew, what's the rule you say? The rule of something, you should double your money in X amount of years.
Yeah, rule of 72.
Rule of
You
72.
know, you can basically put in like, you know, and divide by 72, like whatever, you know, what, I guess how much money you have, and then divide that by the rule of 72, and it tells you how long it takes, whatever it is. So, but, you know, in the end, it all comes down to just saving. I mean, you have to save, you have to cut expenses. Then you can start doing more education about, okay, where do I put my investments at? For the vast majority of you, it's going to be put in an index fund. Index fund is like a mutual fund. You know, you don't have to do hardly any of the work whatsoever. You just put this money and invest in like thousands of different companies. It spreads it out. Most average returns are about 7 or 8%. You don't have to do any research.
That's different than a mutual fund?
What's that?
It's different than a mutual fund?
Well, I mean, mutual fund, index fund, I mean, it's essentially the same thing. So, I mean, you know, an index fund basically is like, let's say the S&P 500. Those are the top 500, you know, companies in the United States. So they created an index fund that just tracks those stocks. So it invests your, you know, whatever money you put into those 500 plus companies. You know, and then they have, you know, but they have different types out there too. You know, so they have like the total U.S. and then the total world. So that, I mean, they spread out your money into all these different companies. Not exactly what I was going to get into on here, but there are a lot of different investments that you can do. Vast majority of you are probably going to be safer just putting in one of those index funds / kind of mutual fund, so that way you don't really have to do any of the research. It's a lot harder picking individual stocks, and there's a lot more risk, you know, so you have to really be able to do your homework. Because what's happening is that you're investing in one company. You know, what happens if they go under or something happens and they have a really bad year? So all your money in that one company is going to tank, versus putting your money into companies that's like, you know, hundreds if not thousands of different companies. One company goes bad, you've got 999 that might not be bad.
So it's lower risk.
So yeah, it's less risk.
And don't
Vast
they
majority
update
of
the companies that are, that they represent on those indexes, so if one company's failing, you know, you're not gonna continually eat those
Yep.
losses.
But now I will say, you know, you're kind of a little bit more capped at like the return that you can get. I mean, it's going to be smaller, you know, but safer, you know. And so now I invest in index funds, but I also invest in individual stocks. I like it. I try to do the research. You know, I've done okay, you know, so far. And so, I mean, I like it, you know, but it is a lot riskier. And I go into that mindset knowing, hey, I could potentially lose this, you know, but I'm willing to take that risk. But you can't do any of that if you're not saving your money. You know, you won't have the option of investing or saving if you're not cutting expenses. And so that's, you know, really important. So in the end, you know, when it comes to, you know, deciding how much is enough, like I said, it all comes down to you, how much you are willing to save, how much you're willing to invest, how much you spend a month, your lifestyle that you want to have. You know, certainly, you know, talking to a financial advisor is not a bad thing. You know, coming up with an option. For some people who practice FIRE, there might be one spouse that doesn't want to retire early. And that happens. I mean, you know, you have one person that wants to retire, the other person's like, I don't know what I would do. You know, I mean, they would prefer the work. Maybe they love their job and they're just not ready. A lot of times that means you could probably retire even earlier because, you know, you're still having additional income coming in, you know, along the way. You know, for me, you know, I want to have at least the, you know, the option of being able to retire. I mean, will I fully retire and do absolutely nothing except for golf, even though that does sound great? I don't know. You know, I mean, but I want to have the option of that. I know my wife, Michelle, she does not want to retire. She has made that clear. She says, because she's a teacher, she doesn't work in the summer. She's bored out of her mind. She's ready to go back. Now, for about the first, 3 weeks to a month, she's happy. Everything's great. She enjoys that time off. But then she's like, you know what? I'm ready to go back. And so she knows that she does not want to retire early. If anything, she's been telling me that once she's able to get her retirement check from Oklahoma, she wants to go like Arkansas or Missouri and teach there. So that way she can get a retirement check and be working and making money there too. So but for each, to each their own on that. Okay, so some cutting expenses. I mean, that's at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. It's reduce eating out. That's one example. How many of us eat out, on a regular basis? I mean, yeah. I mean, we all do. Think about how much you spend. And that's why I gave you 2 handouts. It's called that latte factor. First, look at this one that has that little red at the top. So, I'm not really worried about you doing the challenge on this at the bottom there, but if you look at that second paragraph, that's it kind of stood out to me. But it says, basically it gives an example of a 23-year-old, who cuts $5 a day of coffee or snacks or whatever it is, and they save nearly $2,000 a year just by cutting out that $5 a day. So think of your own life. Could you say that you probably spend $5 a day on something related to that? Okay, so then look at that. So nearly $2,000, and so let's say you take that savings every year, that $2,000. And then you're 23 years old. By the age of 65, because you're investing in the stock market, and of course, think about the returns, that's 7-8%. You're looking at close to $500,000 you would have by cutting out $5 a day. So it adds up. It doesn't seem like it. Hey, it's go to Starbucks, go to this, go to McDonald's, whatever. But it adds up over time. Now that doesn't mean you can't have fun and you can't do this stuff, but chances are you may spend more than $5 a day. Maybe you're spending $10 a day. So what happens if you reduce it to $5? So it's all about finding ways to cut back on some of those expenses. And so, but I thought that was interesting, just how something trivial like that, something small in your life, can turn out to be something big, years later. I think a lot of people would be happy, to be able to have $500,000, put back in, and all I had to do was just giving up, coffee or a snack, once a day on that. So so it is doable. It is realistic. The problem is most people, they don't think about this. They don't think about it on a daily basis. They just ignore that. That's the real issue, there. And so the other handout that I gave you is if you decide you want to try this out a little bit. I like the format of this one better than the other one. That's why. It gives a little bit better instructions as well. So the latte factor. So it says, use the following, worksheet below and follow the 4, easy steps. So track every, single expense you spend each day. Write down every purchase, regardless of how big or small. Don't suddenly change your spending habits because you're writing things down, basically. Just go about your normal life, try this. So now review, the worksheet, when you're done, to identify where you can cut down on wasteful spending. Start saving, the latte factor. So you can try this, for maybe, a day or 2 or a week, whatever, just jotting down some of the expenses. But then what you're going to be able to do is you're going to go in there and decide whether or not it's a want or it's a need. Because it says right there, wasted money. So that's, comes down to, is it a want or is it a need? Do you absolutely need this? It was justified expense, or is it just because you wanted it? And so, but it allows you to start evaluating your spending. Think how many people probably don't write down their expenses. They don't want to know. It's better not to know and stuff. And I know, I there's things on here I would be guilty of myself. I've kind of gotten a little sloppy at times, myself, especially my Dr. Peppers. Think how much money I spend on that,
The energy drinks.
And I used to be a lot better. I used to be like, I'd say in the past, few years, I've kind of gotten a little sloppier than normal. Yes, Gina?
No, I just testifying to that.
Oh, okay. Good. So, but but you also have to live your life. And that's like, one thing I keep in mind when I spend things, I'm like, do I really need that? I also think, you know what, you've also saved a lot over your life. You can enjoy a few things here and there, as long as it's not crazy, but, so you do have to have a life, you do need to have fun. I would say in the early years, like when I was still in school, I mean, you would think that, my percentage would be a lot lower in saving. Percentage-wise, it was actually higher when I was in school. Obviously I wasn't saving as much because I wasn't making as much, but we wrote down every little single thing that we spent. We kept journals, and we would evaluate, or I would anyways, evaluate it each month. I had to keep my receipts, track everything. We only ate out once a month, and it was normally, we went to, Pizza Hut, because they had on Tuesday night, they had a buffet, and we did that once a month. We found ways, to save extra money, like, my wife's dad had like a paper route that he was doing, like he worked for like the Daily Oklahoma, big newspaper company, and so he always needed help on Saturday nights, or a Friday, Saturday night, whatever. And so I would go help, and so it was $20, for that night. He'd pay for breakfast in the morning, so we would do that. And so I looked at that. That's $80 a month that I can use for gas, driving to school to help out. And so it's, just the little things that you can do there. So let's click here. Another one was dividend income. Ways to increase your income. Cut expenses, find ways to make money. Side hobbies. If you're an arts and crafts type of person, maybe you start restoring things. You buy things at garage sales, fix it up, sell it. On Facebook or something like that. Making things and selling them online. Obviously you're making money doing that. It's finding things that maybe you have a special skill and that you can utilize that, to make money off of it.
My daughter-in-law goes to that Daily Deals store and gets stuff for $7 and then resells it.
Resells it.
For like a lot more than $7.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, the way I try to make extra money is, especially now, is dividends. Investing. That's where it's taken me years, to save up and invest, but finally my money is really starting to work for me now. Like I don't have to do the work; the money's doing the work for me. But that's the long-term one. That takes a while to get there. That does not happen overnight. You learn along the way, by how to invest, what stocks to invest in. Looking at dividend stocks. There are also stocks that pay a monthly dividend. There's actually quite a few of them that pay a monthly dividend. There are ones that pay, like I said, twice a year. There's some that pay 4 times a year. Most European stocks, are twice a year. Is how they do it. Here in the United States, the vast majority of them do it 4 times a year, bi-quarterly. So, and then of course there are also stocks out there, where they have a monthly dividend. Those are really designed primarily for people who are, retired and are looking for income. So they have certain companies that do that. The idea is to invest in all different types. So you have money coming in, throughout the year, different times. If you invest, in maybe 50, 20, 25, 30 stocks, if you play it right, you're going to be getting, hundreds of dividend checks a year, because of that, because that adds up, 4 times 20, or if it's a, monthly dividends. Think about how many actually dividend checks you would be getting, throughout the year. So, and I have various spreadsheets that I have. So if you ever want to hey, give me an example. I do this stuff for fun because I'm trying to figure out, what I can possibly do during my retirement. So I'm more than happy to share with any of the stuff that I have. So let's look right there. So emergency fund, so this is now, you kind of know what FIRE is, but how do we get started? Before you get started, you have to have an emergency fund, because when you're investing in stocks, the market goes up and down. You can't just take that money out, and if emergency happens, or you could potentially lose money, because what if the stock's down currently, and you're in a bind, so you're going to have to sell at a loss so you can, cover your emergency. So that's why you want to have your emergency fund. Those investments are long term. There's going to be fluctuations, throughout the year, so you just don't want to pull it out the moment you have an emergency. So what is the correct amount of how much you should be saving? It varies, but on average, 3 to 6 months of expenses, of living expenses, is what you should have saved for your emergency fund, at the very least. 3 to 6 months. Now, during their Great Recession, around the 2008, 2009, When people were not able to get, like work as fast, it's taken a lot longer, to get employed when they lost their job. Some financial advisors started arguing that maybe we should do 12 months of, savings, or your saving, expenses. So it varies, but I would say at least 3 to 6 months of emergency. I guess my question would be is how many could say that they've got that at least 3 to 6 months? No worries. That covers all their expenses. Most of us probably not so much. Most of us don't. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Because we can find ways, to correct that. So how do we create that emergency fund? Like maybe, you just determine that is there a set amount each month that you can put back just for that emergency fund. Maybe it's $50. Maybe it's $25. It's going to take time, but I'd rather you have something going towards the emergency than nothing. Most people, what they do is like, I can't put anything. I just can't. But is that true? Because when you start writing down everything that you're spending and you evaluate what's a wasteful spending, and what's not, then you can start realizing, well, maybe I probably could put $25 or $50 a month, back. But you don't know until you start writing down what your expenses are. So to me, that's step number 1. Write down what you're spending. You have to know where the money's going. Once you do that, then you start, setting up your emergency fund, slowly building that up over time, until you get to those expenses. Now, I would tell you the vast majority of people, well into their, 50s and 60s, many don't have an emergency fund. And then to me, that's when you probably need that emergency fund more than ever. Because let's say if you're in your 50s, realistically, how many years, do you have until you're at least supposed to typically retire?
15.
Yeah. So, it's not a lot of time. And so, so you have to start somewhere. But most people get discouraged and then they just don't do it at all. You need to do at least something. Now, one of the things that financial advisors will tell you is follow the 50-30-20 rule. So 50-30-20 rule. How many of you have ever heard of the 50-30-20 rule?
Yesterday.
Because yesterday we were talking a little bit about it, yeah. So this is the standard. This is what financial advisors will typically tell you need to do. Like the average person, not their FIRE community, because remember, they're saving 50 to 75% of their income. But this is like the average person out there is what they should be doing right now. So what that means is that 50%, so if you take a look there, 50% goes towards needs. Those are things that you have to have. Rent, food, utilities. Every single month, those are, you can't live without those. So that is, the 50% of your income goes towards that. 30% goes towards your wants. That means entertainment, eating out, hobbies, golf, for example, things like that. 30%. Now, to me, as a person who saves more than the 20% that you're going to see down here, that number is really high. That's honestly where you're going to be able to cut eventually. But we'll get to that. So, and then 20% goes towards your financial goals, saving. Saving, investing, putting a little bit of money towards your emergency fund, and so forth. So, does that look even remotely doable to you? What are your thoughts? I'm gonna go with Debbie. She looks like she's really focusing in on those numbers.
Really, yeah. So where I'm at now, I think that 30 and that 20 could be reversed. But where I was when I was these kids' age, I think 50%, like my rent's gonna be more than 50% probably. And then you add food and utilities, that 50% is gonna be higher.
Yeah. So,
I agree. I feel like the numbers or the percentages are off.
I just feel like rent in Joplin's really high in comparison to
Yeah.
salaries, wages.
but yeah. But that's what they preach to you. If you go to a financial advisor, you're sitting down with a financial planner, you're trying to figure out your finances, what you need to be doing towards retirement and so forth. Many of them are going to argue to follow, the 50-30-20 rule. Now they may say they'll look at your finances and say, okay, well maybe we have to adjust that a little bit. So maybe it's 10%, or whatever. But just keep in mind, these numbers here, these percentages, is only if you're planning essentially to be able to retire around 65 years of age. It has nothing to do really with the FIRE community, because remember they're saving crazy amounts.
I think the mistake we made, though I hope you guys don't make, is as you graduate from college and as your income increases, then I increased my expenses, got the bigger house, got the more expensive car. I mean, in retrospect, I wish I would've stayed in that level of house, stayed in that level of car, and put that money into savings, but I didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most, and I would tell you, the vast majority of us, once we start working and get that, job that we've worked hard and went through all the school for, we start spending.
Yeah.
And then you start thinking, well, once you've done it for a while, you think, well, there's no way I can save. You get used to a certain lifestyle, and then you don't want to go back. But then if you just thought, like once you've been retired, or once you've been done with school and it's been 5 years into your career and your expenses and so forth, you have to go back and think, okay, I lived on a lot less when I was a college student. I mean, a lot less, and so it comes down to, what do you value? What do you want? Do you want a big house? Or do you want maybe a smaller house? So like when you're looking at this, like 50%, so maybe, you're out there in your career, do you want to buy the $300,000, $400,000 home, nice big home and so forth? Or can you find, a smaller house? Maybe it's $170,000, versus, the 300 something thousand. Obviously your mortgage payment is going to be a lot less, with that, versus, the other. Or a car payment. Do you need a brand new Lexus or whatever it is, a brand new, car? A lot of times, they say, well, I bought me a brand new car because I deserve it. I've worked hard, I've done all this. Well, most of us have probably deserved, nice things. Just because you deserve it and have the money to do it doesn't mean you should do it. So it's,
Life lesson right there.
can you get a car, that still gets you where you need to be, that's still nice, but for, a lesser price? The car I drive now, I think has 216,000 miles on it. I paid $3,500 cash. I could certainly buy a brand new car if I wanted, but I don't want it. Because it will depreciate as soon as you take that off the lot. And then think about, the car payments and all the interest that you have to pay. Normally when I buy a car, I pay cash. And so, but I try to keep it, the price usually pretty low. And so, since I drive so much, I don't want to buy a brand new car. Because all I'm going to do is put a ton of miles on a brand new car. And so that's part of it. But I have friends, that have like, $40,000, $50,000 cars, and then they have, $300,000 and $400,000 plus, dollar homes, and then they have a lot of toys. This one who's a lawyer who I went to school with, he works in Sherman. He's a lawyer, has his own practice, makes a ton of money, but I will tell you, he is enslaved to that job. There's no, he has to work to keep up with that lifestyle. They're not saving money. He graduated law school. I think it was like $150,000, $160,000 in student loan debt, and then of course, started working and making good money now. But of course, house, student loan payment. His mortgage is crazy. So you think about all those expenses. He has to work to keep up with that lifestyle. Now he doesn't seem to mind. He likes his job. It is kind of stressful. He works a lot. But that's fine for him. But it's not something that I would want. But yeah, so is 20% realistic? It might not be realistic right this second, but could it potentially be, once you're in your career? If you're willing to potentially, reduce some of those expenses. Not live in the 300,000 plus home, maybe settle for something a little bit less than that. Instead of a $400, a monthly payment for a car payment, maybe you can find something, cut that in half close to. Is it at least possible, I guess? That's really what it comes down to. Doesn't mean that necessarily you're going to do it or you want to do it, but is it possible? And so that's what really, FIRE community is about. It's about, making the choice to cut your expenses so you can save more money and potentially have the opportunity to retire early if you want. You have to give up. You can't just, have it all. You have to be willing to sacrifice and give up something. That's what it really comes down to, in my opinion. What do you value? What are you willing to give up? So these resources here, those are some really good sites. We're going to look at a couple real fast. One is, thebalance.com. I really like that site. It's really good. Retireby40.org. This is where I've been following this person, his journey, for several years now. He retired when he was 38. So he worked for Intel. He had computer science. He made some really good money, but he was burned out. He hated his job. He hated going to work. It was just like pulling teeth for him. His wife also makes good money. She's kind of in the IT area as well. She loved her job. She was moving up. Getting promotions. And she wanted to keep doing it. But for him, every day was super stressful, and he just dreaded going to work every day. And so for him, he was like, you know what, I want to be able to retire. So they started saving for several years. Obviously, they made really good income, so they could save a decent amount. So his website is just a journey, kind of his life, things that he does. He sets financial goals. He knows where every single penny is going. Last time, I heard he's worth somewhere close to like $3 or $4 million now. And so, so he's been doing this for years. He actually makes money off of his website. So, but yeah, I think he's in his mid 40s now, because I think he's been retired for about 8 or 9 years, somewhere around there. And so, pop these up real fast. So one is the calculator, the FIRE calculator. It's still on, so this is money, under30.com. I would definitely encourage you to check that out. There are so many really cool things on there. Well, let's take a look at an article that they had where they had this calculator. And so you could plug in your information. So I'm gonna let you guys tell me what you want to put, what you want me to put in there. Yes, there's the guy. He doesn't look like he's 30, by the way. So, but okay. So age. So give me an age you want me to put in. So like a starting age. We're gonna figure out how much you would have.
35.
So 35. Is that the consensus? Okay. So 35. Okay. So after tax.
Wait, is that the current, when you want to start investing or when you're trying to have
Your
money
current
start?
age.
Okay.
So we'll go with 35. Okay. So now keep in mind, as a college student, you're not going to have a lot of income right now. So try to visualize where you're going to be at once you're actually in your career. Be realistic price-wise, but think about that. So let's say after-tax income, things that you're taking home. So give me a number.
I think in our area, that'd be like closer to 40,000,
Yeah.
not
Okay.
80,000.
Yep. Okay. And that's
Depending on your major.
Yeah, that's what we'll do. Okay. Living expenses.
25.
I'd say 16.
How much? Give me a number. I'll let you just something maybe in the middle there.
20,000.
20,000. Let's go with 22,000.
Okay.
I agree with that. Hey, things come up. Car expense. Car breaks down. So okay. So this we got to put in something. Let's just why don't we put in? You think $1,000 would be okay? Maybe that's like what you currently have in your investments, like in your stocks.
Sure.
We'll say. We'll just I think that's a real number. A realistic number that most people could put. Chances are, once you are in your career, you should be able to put more than that. Now you have to put in how much what you can most likely contribute each year. How much do you think you could put in? Think about like where you were at originally.
Based on those numbers, probably about 3.
Okay,
It
so
should be much higher, but
Like
normally
5?
that would be
so you
most
got
people.
18,000.
Yeah.
It's all said and done. So you want to say 3?
That feels like it'd be realistic.
Okay.
For
Yeah.
most.
Well, let's try it. We can see. Now that's just kind of like the default. Normally, most of the stock market you typically see 7 to 8%. So you want to keep it 8%, or do you want to go to 7?
Okay.
Okay.
Why not?
Okay. How much money do you have in your regular savings? You want to put 1,000, or do you want to put maybe 3,000? Because remember, your regular savings, that's kind of like part of your emergency fund, so to speak. So you may
You
have a
don't
little
really
bit
want
more.
to start investing until you have that built up, though, right?
Right.
So maybe 10,000.
Okay.
But is that true, that you don't want to invest in the market too?
You can honestly do all 3. It's just you're going to have a much smaller amount. Think about like if you had like an extra $300 a month, to put. So I would break it up into different categories. I'd have $100 a month, maybe going towards my savings, or 150 go to my savings, and then maybe 150 go towards investing. Because time and you're gonna find out once we calculate this, time is, you know, what's gonna make, you have more money in the long term.
Because what I've heard you say here today is just putting it in a savings account.
It's not
is
enough.
Not gonna do it
Yeah,
for you.
you have to be saving along, investing along the way. Now that number may be different for everyone, and so.
But I can see what you're saying too, you need to have.
Like,
Gotta have-
I'm
you
wondering,
have
just-
some-
I'm wondering, is there a certain amount of money you should have saved before you invest?
You know, I mean,
Well, you wanna keep your emergency fund separate from that, right? So that
yes,
would be a
emergency
different
fund is a
savings.
completely separate deal. I mean, now, it all comes down to how much money you're making. Like, for example, you know, if I was going to, you know, like have an emergency fund, I mean, obviously, I'm gonna wanna build it up at least a little bit, you know, first. But that doesn't mean I'm going to be doing this for several years before I start investing. You know, I may spend a year or two, you know, maybe creating an emergency fund, and then maybe I start investing. Or you can do both. It's just you're going to have a reduced amount of how much you can be putting in there for a little while.
I guess in my mind, I was just thinking like, if you don't have anything saved up, why would you go invest $500 or
Yeah.
$1,000?
You know, I mean, you should. I mean, in an ideal world, you know, it would be nice if you could do both. You know, I mean, in an ideal world, you know, if you could.
So it doesn't have to be a substantial savings, but something.
Yeah, and every month you're putting a little bit back until you reach, you know, that 3 to 6 months of living expenses. Once you hit that, you know, that 3 to 6 months, then you don't have to, you know, continuously save for that. Now, if something comes up and you have to spend a little bit, then obviously you want to replenish it, you know, get it back to where it was at. You know, so like normally what I do is for my regular savings, I try to keep on an average of 20 to 25,000 is what I generally put back. You know, what I have set for my emergency fund. You know, on average.
Well, because
So-
there's risks involved. Well, I guess not, because this is more in investing in your retirement, so it's not the same as stocks, right? Like,
Well,
there's not that-
investing towards your retirement. I mean, you're going to be investing in
There's-
stocks. The
there's-
regular
so
savings.
There's still that risk involved then.
There's definitely there's risk in saving for with investing. I mean, anytime you invest, like if you put your money in a savings account, there's no threat of losing it. It's covered. You know, it's FDIC approved. You know, up to I think was it $250,000 or something like that. I mean, you're not going to lose money. You're not going to make hardly anything at all, and that's the problem. So you have to invest. You know, when we're looking at our retirement, but that's long term. You could be investing for 30, 40 years. So I mean, some years the market may not be so good, but then you may have a couple really good years. In the end, it all kind of balances out to around that 7 to 8% of annual returns. But there are some years that are really bad, and you're going to look at your account and you're going to think, oh my God, you want to pull it out, but you don't want to do that. So
Because I was just thinking, if I only, because like right now I have $1,000, saved up. So if I were to start investing in retirement, is there going to be a big enough risk involved to where I could potentially end up in it?
So like if I was in I'll just give you an example. If I was in a situation, that similar to that, most retirement, like I would create a Roth IRA, which is a retirement account. There's different types. There's traditional, and then there's Roth. I like Roth because there's a little bit more flexibility in certain rules that you have. You can't touch it until you're 59 and a half. Is one of the rules, but you can contribute beyond a certain age as well with the traditional one. At a certain point, you actually have to start taking money out of it. But most of the times when you set up one of those accounts, you have to have at least $1,000 just to get started. So I would say you're not quite there to do that. You want to have your emergency fund. Now, let's say you had $3,000 or $2,000 saved. Then I would say, I'd probably have my fund, my $1,000 emergency fund, and then at least start my Roth. Now you have limits on how much you can put into a Roth each year. I think the number is $6,000 unless you're over a certain age, and then they allow you more to kind of make up, for the age part. So savings $1,000. I can tell you now how much would you put towards your savings on average. I'll let you decide.
Now, is that putting into just a savings account, that number?
Yes, so each month you decide, okay, I'm going to put, X, or this is more like your 5% of expendable income. So what do you think? 5%, of that, or 3%?
I mean, I think when you're just starting out after college, you don't have a lot of money to put into savings.
What about 2%? Is that doable? And then, of course, rate of return. We both know a savings account.
2%
May as well be
is
zero.
This sucks.
It's so bad. It is so bad. But for us to be happy, we're going to do 1%. Even though we both know that's very difficult.
And you get 0.1% on a regular.
Yeah. And so now, let's click, and then of course you have to put in what you think you will need to have for retirement, living expenses each year. What do you think you need?
Per year.
Yeah, per year. Well, on average, what you think you'll have to have?
What did we say, income was 40 or 40?
Yeah, it was at 40, so maybe just go back to 40,
40.
just for now, for argument's
I
sake.
don't know, 'cause when you get older, you got more expenses.
Could.
I just watched a retirement video today, and when you retire, you need 90% of your same amount of money. I thought it was gonna be a lot lower, because I thought, no work clothes, not traveling, not paying your medical premiums.
No.
And it said, no, you still need 90% of your income. I'm like, great.
Well, I would think there'd be like
Forever.
more medical bills or more.
Yeah, could be.
But then I thought, well, you have Medicare, but it turns out Medicare doesn't pay everything.
Yeah.
So I'm going to put 40,000 just for argument's sake,
Okay.
and we'll see.
1.2.
Well, it's kind of slow. We'll see what happens.
So I have a story
Just
about
because I
this
broke
too.
it when I put it in mine.
It's like froze up there a little bit.
My father-in-law got ill in September, and so we've kind of helped take it over, and my husband's one of the powers of attorney.
Yeah, it's
I
kind of
looked
like
at his
freezing
bank
up on us. We've been doing this, I think, for so long on here.
statement.
But why it's doing that, let me show you the other stuff real fast and then we'll be done. So that's that retire by 40 real fast. Yeah, which is really good. I like this website, really good articles. I mean, obviously his blog goes to different passive income. So click on there, for example. He just talks about his journey. I mean, and he tells you exactly how much money he makes, what he's done, where everything is at, what ratios and percentages that he's trying to do, and he talks about his goals, where everything is at. I mean, he's an open book, on his journey and what he's doing, and then he tells you like how he's generating money. So because he owns like rental properties, that's one of the things where he makes money. He also talks about, he has articles where it's like how being a landlord is not the best thing at times, and people mess up his apartments. He's got to fix them, but it's just his journey, and that's what it kind of resonates with me. And so, but there's just so many things that you can look on here, and play around with. This doesn't happen overnight. Like I said, you got to do research. You got to take an active effort. You got to learn from others, what works, what doesn't, with their journey, But yeah, I really like this website, and like I said, he's got so many different like articles, on here. So
Do you have your own?
I did for a while, but I stopped doing it because I've been taking all those classes, business classes I'm taking. I just don't have the time. And that's been the issue. But you can see right here, like he talks about fire. So I mean, you can click on that and you can look at, what he talks about relating to fire. And you can see right here, what's the thing that we talked about? 50%. That's generally kind of like the low mark, the 50% and above, for fire. And so, let's see here. Let's go back real fast. It's probably just froze on there.
It's probably laughing at our numbers, like,
I can't
you're never gonna
compute.
So,
get to retirement.
but if you go back to this website, we'll just look real fast because obviously it's going slow or whatever. Go back.
So I know this would be a different workshop, but if someone were wanting to start investing and they don't want to go to a professional because they're gonna take a percentage of their money.
Yep.
Where would a young person just graduating college go to? What websites do you recommend?
Well, I can
where
tell
would
you,
go
I
to
mean,
start investing?
what I've done, because I don't want to go to a financial advisor and I don't want to pay, and it varies, but most financial advisors are looking at about 2%, 1% to 2%. That let's say you have $10,000 with them, each year they get 2% of whatever the value that you have with them, or 1%, 1.5%, whatever. And so I didn't want to do that. And so one of the things that I did was Vanguard. I mean, there's a lot of different ones out there. Vanguard, is a company, that you can buy stocks, but you mainly buy mutual fund, index funds. You can set up retirement accounts with them. They are known for being cheap. So like their expense ratio, what you actually have to pay, is generally one of the lowest, in the industry. And so that's why I chose them, and they've been around for so long. I mean, they're well established. I mean, there's a lot of like companies that also use them for their retirement accounts and stuff. And I like Vanguard, and it's easy to set up. We actually got Cheyenne. You know, she got her Roth IRA set up with them. You know, it was an easy process. She is now starting, you know, the save for retirement, and so starting young. And so that would be a good place. So on here, all the different categories: credit cards, banking, loans, investing. You can see right here, investment calculators, investing versus saving, you know, how to invest in stocks, and it gives recommendations of places too, where you can go and set up accounts at. So like you can see here, you know, they have, and I just want to show you this one example. Let's just say you have and hopefully this calculator will work this time, but we'll do it fast. So let's say you have $1,000, you start off with your investment. We're only talking about investing, nothing else right now. If you're just investing, I want to show you the power that it has. Do you think being able to save $200 a month would be realistic? Not necessarily right this second, but in the future. I mean, you know, 200 would probably be okay. And then 7% will say, let's just say, and this is how long that you invest for, 30 years. So let's say, you know, if you're 20 years old or whatever, or 25, you know, you'd be 55 by the time this happens. That's how much
Wow.
you would have. $250,000 if you're only investing $200 a month, you know, for 30 years, 7% annual rate of return. This is how much just the interest, you know, that you would accumulate in the stock market.
Okay, and you change that
Okay.
200 a month to 3,000 for me,
Okay,
but on the number of years, change that to 10.
okay. We're gonna find out how much money Debbie can make here.
I
Get
kind
ready.
of,
Yeah,
yeah,
how much that would be?
late too.
Okay, that makes me feel better.
Yeah.
There you go.
Think of the interest.
Change that to 5 years for me.
Okay. Okay.
I really don't want to work 10 more years. Okay.
So
See
I mean,
how it pays for you guys to invest now, not when you're my age.
compound interest, because you are reinvesting, you know, that like the dividends, you know. So let's say your index fund, your mutual fund that you get it when you set it up. It's going to ask you if you want to reinvest your dividends. You do, obviously, and so that means anytime they pay out a dividend, they take that money that you would have got, and then they reinvest it by more shares. And it just keeps accumulating over the years, and that's why you're seeing, you know, big numbers. But imagine if you put your money in a savings account. Yes, you know, I mean, it's guaranteed, it's safe. I mean, FDIC approved. You're not going to lose money, but the amount of money you're going to make is practically nothing. So, like, look right here. Let's go back to Debbie's deal here. Let's pretend like it's a bank, so to speak. Let's put 1%. That's if if you're getting like a CD, a certificate of deposit, normally you get that. And so let's take a look. So remember, $35,000 in interest that she would have had from there.
Wow.
Now look at what her interest would be if it was 1%. Now it's safe, if you're at 1%, there's no threat of you losing money. But look at the big difference there. From $35,000 to basically $4,500. That's. You won't be able to save enough to retire if you're only relying, on like the bank or saving account or a CD. You have to invest, or you can work for the rest of your life, basically, or just hope that you get it with a company that has a really great retirement plan and bank on that. Like the school systems, they generally have a good retirement plan. Now, obviously, it depends on what state you're in. That plays a factor too, and so forth. Most people, the reason why they don't retire early, like the fire community, the ones they have to worry about, is health insurance.
Yeah.
That gets most people. The greatest advantage I have for myself, why I feel like I can still be able to do it, is because since I'm Native American, I get free health care as long as I'm in Oklahoma. If I live in Oklahoma, I get free health care. And so, and that's why I live in Oklahoma. Because as you get older, something that you were kind of mentioning, you might have more, medical expenses potentially, and so for me, I feel like, hopefully, that I should be okay with that, because of the health clinics and stuff.
So Eddie, you said Cheyenne set up her retirement.
Yep, I helped her set it up, through Vanguard.
Does Vanguard tell you what stocks you should buy?
No,
How do
because
you know
what
what
you do-
stocks you
Okay,
should buy?
so what you do is that they have what they call targeted plans, and what that means is that like mine, I have one. It's a targeted, it's a Roth targeted, 2040 plan. And so what that means is that I pick a year where I think, hey, this is probably at the age that I would retire, like a traditional age that you would retire. And now it doesn't mean you have to retire at that year, but the way they allocate where your money goes into different stocks depends on that number. And so for example, if you choose, let's say a 2050 plan, what's going to happen is that they put your money in like 4 different indexes. So they are putting your money into all these different indexes, with bonds, and then of course the regular stock market, various things like that. It's spread out, so that way you minimize your risk. But over time, as you get older, they change the percentage. So like in the beginning, you may have 90% of your money is going towards stocks, and then a small percentage going towards some bonds. And then as you get older, they start changing that number. More goes into bonds, less in stocks, because bonds are safer. They don't have nearly as much fluctuations. And so as you get older, they take less risk and stuff. But they do all this themselves. You don't have to do anything at all,
Okay.
which is great. And their expenses, what you have to pay is really small. Like you're paying depending on how much money you have in there, like if you have like 10,000 or whatever, you may be paying like, $10, $20 a year. That they have something set up. It's small, and so and you don't even see it because they don't give you a bill. They just take it out of your bill. And remember, you're making interest and all this other stuff along the way. So honestly, you hardly ever even really see it.
Was there a minimum amount to open it?
Yeah. So a Roth IRA, at least with Vanguard, is $1,000. That's and most places tend to be around that $1,000 for setting up one of those Roths. I feel so.
Do you think it'd be smart to do the Vanguard and then also look at stocks and other stocks as
Yep.
well? Just kind of doubling up, having a little bit over here, but then also
That's what I do. So have you ever heard of Jim Cramer? Mad Money. His own show. I love watching that show. I don't agree with everything that he says on there, but one of the things. But the reason why his show is called Mad Money is because he says any of the extra money after you have counted, putting your money towards your retirement, like your Roth or traditional IRA, your extra money, that's the mad money. That's what you invest in individual stocks. But you always take care of your smart stuff that you need to do. Putting your money in your IRA, do all that stuff first. But any extra income that you have, you could potentially start investing in individual stocks. I always say wait on that for at least a little bit, just because most people get nervous when they're investing. They've never done it before. They don't know a lot about it. And so by actually setting up like a Roth IRA, you're taking some of the risk out. It's not because it's so diversified, and it's giving you time to slowly learn more about the stock market, learning about individual stocks, because it's just a much riskier deal. Now I invest in a lot of individual stocks, but I spend hours upon hours researching these companies and stuff. And yes.
I hear about the younger generations or the ones in college using those apps.
Yep, they're
Robinhood and stuff like.
Robinhood, is very popular app. I'm not a fan of Robinhood. That's me. Doesn't mean it's a bad
I just
place.
heard about them using those investment apps.
Yeah.
Are those actually worthwhile, or are they?
I know a lot of people that use Robinhood. Robinhood is more for a smaller investor. So that's what they cater to the smaller investor, the college student, a couple $100 type thing. It's probably not bad, just to test out the waters and stuff. But I also, there's things that you saw about the GameStop and all the issues they had, and so they were actually restricting their users from being able to purchase those stocks and stuff, and so it made a lot of people mad because Robinhood is supposed to be what for the little guy, be able to sit there and invest and stuff, and then they restricted to help out some of the big hedge funds, because there was such a fluctuation in that. So a lot of people got turned off with them because of that event and stuff. But I don't think it's a bad thing. You obviously want to look at fees. Robinhood is very low, in what they charge. And a lot of it's free because they make their money on the back end, like how much volume that they do, and they have deals with these companies. I use a couple different ones. So like some let's think of J.P. Morgan Chase is one. Charles Schwab is one. Like if you're wanting to set up an individual like brokerage account and start investing in individualized stocks, those are probably like Charles Schwab is probably a really good one. I mean, there's a lot of different ones out there. Vanguard is not good for investing in individualized stocks. The fees are too high. What they are good at is the index funds, mutual funds. That's their business. ETFs, those types of funds. Exchange traded fund is what ETF is. But what I really wasn't setting up, a workshop to go into that detail. We will do one eventually, more in detail about that. But Vanguard is probably the safest bet, low fees to start off. Eventually, when you want to start investing in individualized stocks, like I said, Charles Schwab or J.P. Morgan Chase or one of those would probably be a good one to start. Me personally, I like having a couple different accounts just because I don't want to have all my money in one account. I just don't like that. I'm always worried about security and you don't want anyone stealing your password or being hacked. A lot of these companies actually have they can guarantee if someone hacks you, they can guarantee you're not going to lose money. You have an insurance policy type thing. But I just don't want all my money in one account. I like to spread it out just a little bit.
So as these students are graduating, getting their real job in the real world, if their employer matches like a retirement savings account, what would be your advice to them on how much to put in if the employer matches?
I think it depends on what they're willing. Some they do 4%, 6%. Most of them tend to be around that 4% range. It seems is pretty popular.
So put in as much as
put in as much as they will match.
Okay.
Because that's free money. You put in X amount and they will match up to a certain point. That is free money. You don't want to. My sister, who for many years, at the hospital she's working at, did not do that. I forgot. We calculate how much money she could have made by doing that, and it was over 100-something thousand. Because she had been there for so long and she didn't do it. Because she just I don't feel comfortable, with the stocks, and so she's probably gonna be working until she's 70. She just hasn't planned. And so yeah. So if they match it, absolutely. At least put something. You got to put something. That's the thing. If you're not doing nothing, if you're doing nothing, you can't escape age. You're going to get older. It's going to happen. You're going to be 65, 70 one day, and the question is, will you have done enough during that time?
So when they're out looking for that first great job, they want to consider benefits.
Oh yeah.
Not just salary, but health insurance, retirement,
Yeah.
all the things.
Every company is different. Some are better than others when it comes to those benefits. Sometimes you may work at a company where maybe the pay's not great, but the benefits are amazing. And you have to weigh all those pros and cons to that. But you got to start somewhere. And that's kind of the moral of the story of all this, is that take that challenge, that thing here, and just write down some of your expenses. Maybe for a week or whatever it is. And just kind of get at least a rough idea. Like anytime you go out to fast food or get something at a Quick Stop or anything, be writing that down. Actually write what it is. If you go to Walmart, maybe you pick up some food, but then you pick up a whole bunch of junk food. Do you really need the junk food? So it's like the wants versus the needs. You need you don't need it, you want it. And so that way you actually have to justify it, and you will be shocked probably on how much is actually would be considered wasteful spending. There's a high probability you're in the hundreds of dollars, of what's being wasted.
$5 a day is a very low estimate.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So so you can save in the end. It may not be everyone's number is different, but I do think it's possible. But you're not going to see big return. It takes time. It does, you can't get rich quick. It's gonna take several years to get there. And study, learn, look at those websites, practice with the calculators, do different scenarios. Say, okay, if I get this job, I'll probably be making this much. If I don't get this job, and if I'm making this much, this is how much I'd be able to save. You know, just play around with it. Look at all different types of numbers. You know, there. All right, that's all I got for you. Valuation. Hopefully you fill that out, and then.
You can leave your evaluation forms over.
And hopefully everyone signed the sign-in sheet. If you haven't, sign in the sign-in sheet real fast.
Thank you for coming, Easy Point.
Yes,
Over
Easy
at
Point.
Billings Student Center, you can go over and get a button for middle